Hello students. The idea of sound fiscal policy is advocated by many economists. Fiscal policy is a key aspect of public finance. The economic management of a country heavily depends on how the funds are acquired through various sources. No country can claim for unlimited funds and revenue. In turn, there are always restrictions on finances available for economic development. However, the demand and aspiration of people have no limitations. As such, economic planning becomes a challenging task. Raising income and revenue through taxation is a commonly adopted aspect of the state policy. However, with every increase in taxation, there is a resistance from people. People find it difficult to digest the idea of unrestricted and heavy taxation. Similarly, other sources of revenue of the state have their own limitations. The government cannot stop increase in state expenditure activities of economic development and social welfare. This always adds to the burden on the state exchequer. The solution to this problem is to have an effective fiscal management system. How the state finances are managed and what are the key issues considered while effectively employing or deploying scarce economic resources is a very important issue. Often, it is noticed that government expenditure and tax revenue are not closely related to one another. In many situations, the total expenditure and total tax receipts do not match evenly when the economy is having large amount of expenditure with limited income. As such, it results into the situation of deficit financing. When revenue is more than expenditure, there is a situation of surplus. In both the cases, the government requires an efficient fiscal policy. A situation of surplus does not permit the government to liberalize its control on the economic activities. Similarly, a situation of deficit does not permit government to reduce expenditure on many essential public welfare and developmental activities. Therefore, in both the cases, we need a systematic and well-defined fiscal policy. Students, fiscal policy as a macroeconomic policy has to have different instruments or techniques. Governments may use one of the instruments at a time or a mix of instruments depending upon the economic situation, objectives and targets of the macroeconomic policy. First, taxation policy. The government is obliged to make a progressive policy of taxation by making amendments in direct as well as indirect tax rates. The government has to balance its decisions related to tax rates because with higher tax rate, the purchasing power of people is reduced, which often results in reduction of investment. Whereas a reduction in the tax rate will increase the money spent by public and will have a greater impact on inflation. Therefore, a balance has to be attained so as to impose an appropriate tax system which benefits the economy. Second, government expenditure. The government is responsible to decide the areas of development like education, health and public welfare. The government expenditure policy develops the government budget in the direction it wants the economy to move. Third, deficit financing policy. In order to fill the gap between government spending and income, the government can resort to deficit financing by printing new currency, but the negative side of this is that there would be higher rate of inflation if the value of currency goes down. Fourth, public debt. If deficit financing is unable to fill the gap between government spending and income, then the government can take help from international institutions like World Bank. The only limitation is that repayment of this debt would be a difficult problem to resolve. Now let us look at various dimensions of fiscal policy. The fiscal policy has many important dimensions. It is necessary that various aspects of economy should be given due importance for successful implementation of fiscal policy. A sound fiscal policy is not inclined towards any particular purpose or objective, but it gives balanced importance to different aspects of economic management. The diagram given here explains the various dimensions of fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is one of the important aspects of economic management that governs different aspects of the economy and helps in smooth and effective governance. It cannot concentrate only on one dimension of the economy. Economy of a nation depends on multiple facets of governance. An effective government helps the society in different ways. The four important planks of economic management are social justice, full employment, sustainable and meaningful economic growth, and economic stability. If a government focuses only on benefiting a small section of the society and promotes uneven growth of the economy, then the society cannot survive. It automatically will result into social unrest. A stable government cannot afford to have social unrest. The most effective canon of taxation advocates balanced and equitable taxation on different sections of the society. As such, the fundamental concern of every fiscal policy is providing due social justice to every section of the society. Sustainable growth is another important feature of sound fiscal policy. It is not the short-term objective, but a long-term perspective that matters when it comes to economic planning. Often, the principal consideration of growth is sustainability, stability, and long-term derived benefits. The economy cannot sacrifice its long-term benefits to attain quick gains. Hence, the focal point of fiscal policy is to maintain a right and acceptable growth rate. This requires a continuous and steady flow of revenue from appropriate sources. The stability and support to the economy depends on the level of unemployment. Often, the principal challenge before the planners is how to generate employment. Generating employment means spending on various principal heads of development. Fiscal policy provides suitable and adequate quantum of revenue to meet the target, that is, target to achieve full employment. Failure to generate employment is a matter of challenge for the economy. The term stability indicates proper maintenance of balance between different activities so that the pace of growth and the rate of change is in tune with the requisite expectation of stakeholders. Fiscal stability indicates maintaining a right balance between generation of revenue and expenditure for welfare so that the public exchequer can rightly balance its earnings. Stability also indicates continuity of growth process and increasing the revenue without burdening the people. Now, full employment, economic stabilization and growth and fiscal policy, let us look at that. The first aspect of the policy is fiscal policy and full employment. Keynes said that the various instruments of fiscal policy, taxation, deficit budget and public expenditure, public borrowings should be used effectively to attain and maintain full employment. In a developing economy, the problems faced are different from those of a developed economies. There are two types of unemployment, that is cyclical and disguised. A fiscal policy should be such that it should create necessary employment without affecting the pace of growth and balanced economic development. The main objectives can be stated like this. First, raising the ratio of savings to national income by checking consumption. Second, increasing the rate of investment in the economy. Third, encouraging the flow of investment into productive channels. Fourth, reducing as far as possible large inequalities of income and wealth. The first three objectives, when virtually fulfilled, will lead to an increase in the national product. The fourth objective is related with the distribution of increased national income. Next is fiscal policy and economic stabilization. At times, the techniques of deficit financing, that is government spending exceeds revenue, is used for achieving the various set objectives. The spending on infrastructure, social overhead capital, development of heavy industries which have long gestation period and no immediate returns may lead to scarcity of consumption goods. This leads to an increase in prices and demand exceeding supply. This inflationary situation should be avoided. Thus, a fiscal policy should curb the inflationary trend for a stable growth. After stabilization, we will look at fiscal policy and economic growth. There is a close relation between fiscal policy and economic management. It is necessary that a sound fiscal policy should help in achieving the target of balanced economic growth. A fiscal policy focuses on different issues related with economy, especially management of resources, generation of revenue, and effective deployment of public finance. From this point of view, the relation between fiscal policy and economic growth can be explained by throwing light on certain important issues. First, realization of mobilization of potential resources into productive channels. Second, acceleration of rate of economic growth. Third, inducement and stimulation of private sector investment. Next, promotion of investment in socially desirable channels. Next one is alteration in the pattern of investment and production to improve the general economic welfare and sustain goals like equity in distribution and eradication of poverty. Now, let us see fiscal policy, social justice, trade cycle and problems of unemployment. Students, full employment, growth and stabilization are not the only objectives of fiscal policy. We will discuss now fiscal policy and social justice. The cardinal principle of fiscal policy is to maintain equity amongst different contributors to the public exchequer. A tax policy should neither burden excessively to any particular section by increasing the tax burden, nor should it free any particular segment from any tax liability in total. Similarly, social justice is maintained only when any particular social segment is not neglected while distributing public revenue by applying the principle of equity. Another dimension is fiscal policy and trade cycle. Trade cycle means the various phases of upward and downward movement in a business or economy. An economy progresses and moves towards its highest performing point, boom or prosperity. But due to certain internal and external factors, the economy may face a downward trend, which means a slump in the economic activities. This phase is known as recession. The lowest point in the cycle would be depression. During recession or depression, since the economic activities, especially the private sector activities, face a slump, the private sector capital formation and investment is not much. This is where the government steps in. At a time when private sector is not functioning properly and has inadequate funds, the government through its fiscal policy can bring the economy back on track. Public expenditure on infrastructure etc. can help in increasing necessary revenue and growth rate. The diagram here explains the relation between fiscal policy and trade cycle. The government may incur public debts and use deficit financing to increase its expenditure and thus gradually increase capital formation. This will again give impetus to the private sector to perform, and thus the economy will again head towards prosperity. But while doing so, the government should take care about inflationary trends. Deficit financing, though helps in increasing expenditure and thus increasing income and purchasing power, it has a tendency to result in increase in prices. This is because of the increase in money supply and increased demand. Thus, the level of public expenditure should be decided accordingly. Unemployment has serious long-term macroeconomic implications for different economies. Fiscal policy also tries to look into the problem of unemployment. The problems faced by different economies are different. Therefore, these economies have to develop their policies according to their relevant situations. An underdeveloped economy faces two types of unemployment. First, the cyclical unemployment. Employment is seasonal due to seasonal variation in the activities of particular industries caused by the climatic changes or changes in fashion or by inherent nature of such industries, example agriculture. Second, disguised unemployment. When more people than required work, for example in agriculture, the extra people are said to be in disguised unemployment. That is, it looks as if they are employed, but in reality they are not. Fiscal policy in an underdeveloped economy should aim at increasing the rate of capital formation to deal with its unemployment problem effectively. The main objectives are discussed here. The first one, the basic purpose of enhancing the ratio of savings to national income is to promote the habit of thrift and austerity. It also helps to channelize funds for more productive purposes. It also helps in enhancing the rate of capital formation, encourage transfer of funds to sectors of national priority. Furthermore, it improves the health of economy through self-reliance. Second, when the rate of investment in the economy increases, it promotes a healthy climate. The confidence of investors is given a boost. The circular flow of investment is rightly channelized and an appropriate coordination can be maintained between production and consumption function, saving and investment function, and at the same time capital formation and growth rate. Thirdly, the key to success of economic development is to channelize the funds for more productive channels. Often, in a free or market-driven economy, though the rate of capital formation is good, however, the essential or important sectors remain neglected. Utilization of capital usually depends on the rate of return and indicators of profitability. A good fiscal policy helps to divert the investment to key and productive sectors of the economy. Lastly, the purpose of economic management is not only to generate revenue or create wealth, but it is more important that attention be given towards equal and fair distribution of revenue and wealth. When the revenue is not properly distributed and inequalities of income prevail, it leads to social injustice and dissatisfaction. The idea of economic stability and sustainability cannot be achieved unless and until fair and equitable distribution is done. For this purpose, it is necessary that fiscal management should pay attention towards redistribution of income by imposing right and appropriate quantum of taxes. The fiscal policy often helps the government to collect more revenue from the haves and distribute it to the have-nots. While discussing the instruments and dimensions of fiscal policy, it is important to understand that fiscal policy must have positive influence on economic growth. Let us look at fiscal policy and economic growth. A country may have enough real natural resources, but very often there is a shortage of financial resources. Unless a country has adequate financial resources to mobilize real resources, the objective of development cannot be achieved. The government needs to effectively use all the instruments of fiscal policy. These instruments are presented in the diagram. The first one is taxation. Government may use both direct and indirect taxes to raise finance. The incidence of direct taxes like income tax, wealth tax, gift tax, etc. falls mostly on the rich class, which helps in achieving the objective of equity. Levying steep indirect taxes like import duties, excise duties on luxury and semi-luxury goods consumed by the rich results in reducing the consumption, demand and thus prices. The stability can be achieved. Sometimes, to increase the revenue collection, excise duties may be imposed on mass consumption goods which are borne mostly by poor and middle class people. Public debt is an important instrument that is now being used by almost all governments. Government may incur public debt to supplement taxation. Public debt is not opposed as government pays interest on the loans taken. Government may also take loans from external sources like other countries or international financial associations like International Monetary Fund or the World Bank. Another essential instrument is public expenditure. Government should use major portion of funds for development of infrastructure like power stations, schools, roads, hospitals, etc. These will help in providing foundation for industrial growth in the country. Agriculture should also receive special attention. Expenses incurred on social schemes and labor welfare help in rapid development. Another instrument that is widely used is deficit financing. It has proved as a very dependable means of financing fiscal policies, but care should be taken that this does not lead to inflationary situation due to increase in money supply. Now, fiscal policy and inflation. Fiscal policy is a very important instrument in the hands of government to achieve all-round stability and prosperity. It is an inevitable tool for the government as it helps to allocate the economic resources in the best possible way. In certain cases, inflation creates disequilibrium in the economy. When we have an effective fiscal policy, it helps to avoid depletion and misuse of vital economic resources. Fiscal policy helps in fighting inflation and bringing back economic stability in certain ways. The first one is taxes. Inflation occurs when there is full employment or a situation which is close to it. It is very important to curtail the extra purchasing power of the people. It is also important because there is no idle resource which can be absorbed by extra investment outlays. Government can play a very important role here by widening the old taxes and by imposing new taxes to check the inflationary trends in the economy. Second one is government spending. The spending of government on different hands should be curtailed to the extent that it may be able to reduce the increased spending of the private sector. This should go parallel to the raising taxes so that it might reduce the disposable income of the people. By reducing the government spending, the pressure on aggregate demand is reduced, helping in maintaining economic stability. Another instrument is public borrowing. When the government is not able to meet the expenditure through the revenue, it tries to meet it with public borrowing. This technique can be used to check the purchasing power and unwarranted possession of money with the people. The public borrowing reduces the purchasing power of the people. Therefore, inflation can be controlled if the fiscal policy is properly implemented. Now let's see fiscal policy and status of the economy. There is a close relationship between the phases of development and the kind of fiscal policy that is implemented. The economic status of countries differ due to various reasons. The growth process, resource availability, gross domestic product, generation of wealth and competitive strength decide the stage of economic development. We often classify economies according to the stages of development. Every economy, according to the stage of development, implements different fiscal policy. The purpose of fiscal policy is to maintain the pace of development, regulate the growth rate, and provide justice to different sections of the society. The objective of fiscal policy vary from economy to economy. While settling the objective of fiscal policy, economic planners prefer to consider the critical issues related with growth, development, aspiration of people, techniques of economic management, and the economic philosophy to which the planners intend to adhere. In a table here, a comparative analysis is made as to fiscal policy and the phases of economic development. Let us now understand the relationship between monetary policy and fiscal policy. Monetary and fiscal policy are inevitable part of the macroeconomic policy. These policies aim at sustainable economic growth. The major concern for decision makers in the coordination of both the policies, in spite of many differences, there are many issues which can be taken care within a broad common framework. The load of economic growth is borne by the two pillars of economic management, that is monetary policy and fiscal policy. Here, a comparative analysis is made between fiscal policy and monetary policy. Thus, we have seen that fiscal policy is a very important instrument for socio-economic reforms and development. Every government enforces its philosophy and ideologies through different economic policies. An effectively designed and properly implemented fiscal policy ensures achievement of economic goals and success in financial administration. Thank you. Thank you very much.